let's go ahead and jump into this here. Wanting to start out with just reminding everybody, in case you didn't hear for the past few times, all of our trainings, including this one, is going to be streaming to our YouTube channel. So make sure that you are subscribed to that. It's Keller Williams San Diego Metro for our YouTube channel. And then let's see, we'll start out with some nice welcomes here. As far as recently joining us, give a huge shout out and a nice warm welcome to Christine Isidro. She's one that actually has been working for a property management company for quite some time. Recently joined us, has been engaging in scripts, and was one of the first people to actually do a little social media promotion. And within her first week of joining, has 6 buyer leads already lined up. So great job. Welcome to the family, Christine. We also have joining us Erica Gutierrez. Erica is joining us as a referral from Sarah, and wanting to give her a nice warm welcome as well. So joining up with us. So when you see her around, say hi. Bucket fills. I'm going to turn this over to you guys. Whose bucket would you like to fill, and who would you like to express gratitude to? I want to do a nice little bucket fill. And this was the same as last week, but I can't say it enough to Matt Sadusky for continuing to lead the way as far as our own MREA book club. He's doing that every Monday. We're also going to give a nice little shout out as far as that's every Monday at 8:30 until December 7th. So my little shout out goes to Matt Sadusky for engaging people. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Anyone else? All right, well, if we're feeling a little shy right now, that's okay. Send that love privately, if you will. In regards to the training schedule, so we already mentioned the MREA Book Club by Matt Sadusky, 8:30 until December 7th, every Monday. The KW Command training with Salma, we're kicking this off on Thursday, October 1st, tomorrow. Also for tomorrow is Evie's birthday. Now Salma's class with Command is going to be from 11 a.m. And then what time does that go until? Noon. Okay, cool. So that's for 1 hour starting tomorrow. And then after that, it'll be every Tuesday from 9:30 to 10:30, and Thursdays at 11 until noon. So she's doubling down on those Command trainings. So if you're saying, what am I doing with Command? You have no excuse. Salma's really helping Clarissa out in regards to providing those kind of trainings. Let's see here. October, November tech training schedule will be posted this week, so be on the lookout for that. Broker Bob, are you with us to give us a little update in regards to launch and growth coaching?
I am here, everybody, from sunny San Diego. It's 109 degrees poolside, and I'm enjoying myself. I got a little rest and relaxation going on. So Evie, are you going to be able to pull up the slides? You hopefully have slides on them?
I've got it. I've got it.
Great. Thank you. So big shout out to Jenna. She is in, I believe, launch and growth with Alicia. Congratulations to Jenna. Open up our escrow. And then Nicole. Wow, Nicole signed 2 listings and 1 is already in escrow. Great job, Nicole. I know we've been talking a little bit and you're doing really well. Keep up the great work, Nicole. And good old Mustafa, he came back specifically to join the coaching program, was one of his things he wanted to do. And now he's on his like 3rd or 4th piece of business since he's been back about 2 months. Great job. He's in growth coaching with Alicia as well. And Eric Harris, he just joined Alicia's growth program, and he has opened up his 2nd escrow and growth in less than a month. Great job, Eric. You are doing a great job. Next up, good old Greg. Greg, great job. He opened up an escrow and he beat out 17 other offers. Everybody's going to want to know your secrets, Greg. I think I know what they are, but you might need to share it with everybody in the Facebook page. Great job, Greg. And then on to Clarissa and Barb's coaching program. Quentin Wells opened up his first escrow and he signed another BRE. Great job, Quentin.
That's it.
That's it. Okay, I'll see you guys in a few minutes with the great risk management.
Thank you, Broker Bob. So wanting to pass this over to, as far as our ALC update, the Culture Committee. Give us a little update. Nikki, I believe that you're going to teach us some of your magical baking secrets as well. Talk to us about that.
Okay.
Can't tell if you're muted, darling, because I can't see your face, but there you are. I see you.
I'm just now I am teaching tonight. It is a different series. So I hope you guys, it is a step-by-step process. Most of the things we're going to do are really, really easy, and it's go from completely from baking them to how to fill the cups to putting into the oven, and everything will be done in 1 hour. So please take a look at the ingredients list. They're all really easy and available at Michael's, Sam's, the little tiny pumpkins that are available at Vons. I just bought mine at Vons the day before yesterday, so they have plenty. So I hope to see you guys there. It'll be super fun.
Thank you, Nikki. And if anybody wants a little testimonial in regards to Nikki's amazing abilities, not just in real estate, not just in commercial, not just in like everything that she's doing, but in addition to that, if you've not had her cupcakes or a cake, you're missing out. So this is your way to bring your own little piece of Nikki's magicalness to your own kitchen. Like that pitch, Nikki? All right, next up, let's talk about some property pitches, please. What do you have coming up? You guys have been great in posting on the inner office page. Got some fixers in Mission Hills. What else do we have coming soon to the market?
I have a new listing. I'm actually submitting it as we speak. Birdland up in the Serra Mesa community. It is going on the market today. We will start our showings on Saturday. We have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a family room, just shy of 1,450 square feet. It's in really great shape. It's been tenant occupied for quite a while, but they've really maintained it very, very well. Huge lot, pool sized, and you won't lose a lot of space when you add the pool if you choose to do so. So I will have showings starting Saturday for a few hours, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then we'll be presenting offers on Tuesday. So if you guys want an appointment, schedule it on showing time and I will meet you there. Did I give you the price? $750 is my list price. $750.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Amy, for sharing. By the way, you look very majestic with your beach background and like the fan blowing in your hair. It's just magical. I love it. I love it. All right. What else do we have coming up?
I've got a couple. I've got one condo in Mission Valley. This is an FHA VA approved complex. It is a 4-bedroom condo. That's right, 4 bedrooms, 2-bath. It's 10780 Caminito Bravura. The HOA dues are going up later this year to $300. It's 1,576 square feet, and these patios are very large sized, very unusual for a condo, and they allow pets of any sizes. That'll be coming up in about probably 10 or 15 days. And then I have a house coming up in Rancho Bernardo. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's got a pool. It's in, I just totally spaced on the name of the community. It's not gated, but it's a nice area right off of Escala. It's about 1,700 square feet, and we are still trying to figure out the price, but as of right now, probably about $779.
Oh, great job. All right. So what else do we have coming soon? All right. I'm going to ask Hope. Hope, you with us?
Yep.
I'm here.
All right, Hope, I'm going to ask you. So with these coming soons, we've now heard of 3 at least today. What are we going to do with those coming soon properties?
We are going to unmute yourself and all.
Get Paul in line here, Hope. Come on now.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so we're gonna call expireds and see if we can find any No, we're not going to call expireds. We're going to, I'm sorry, I'm lost right now.
You're good, darling. You're good. All right. So this is something, okay, it's all good. I put you on the spot. I put you on the spot. So what we've been talking about is that whenever we have these coming soon properties, all right, we want to go be sure to go through all of our buyers, past buyers, A buyers, B buyers, C buyers, blast it out, have like an off-market Monday type blast to them. You distribute those properties with a very simple task, just saying, hey, this may not be exactly what you're looking for, but thought you should know before it hits the public. Here's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot, Mission Playmore, priced under this amount. Let me know if you have any questions. And by continuously touching on them, you're still providing value. When people raise their hands, we can pass that over. That's additional reasons too. Then what Hope jumped to, which was you take those buyer needs, you filter it back, hit up those expireds, hit up those canceled. Paul, now I'm gonna highlight you here real quick. How are those conversations going with those expireds?
It's going well.
Yeah?
Yeah, I wanted an appointment this Monday for an expired listing, so.
There you go. There you go. Guys, that is the magic pill we've been talking about. You just play the buyers and sellers together, take this information, relay it over, provide that value. So great job. All right. Well, we're just going to jump right on into this. I mean, so if you're tired of hearing me talk, let's pass it over to Broker Bob, despite him being on vacation. Broker Bob, keep us out of jail. Talk to us.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I'm going to share my screen. So today's risk management is going to be pretty much everything that we have gotten questions on. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'm not going to make the screen bigger. Okay. So today what we're going to cover is, I have a huge amount here. Hopefully we'll get all through it. And in the Q&A, I'm going to cover some stuff of the most common asked questions that we get in the compliance department. So you want to pay attention, stay around for that. But let's get into this. We're going to go talk about the agent TCs, SIP, the seller in possession, or when a seller wants to stay in property after it closes escrow, what the legal issues are happening right now during COVID, and tenant occupied legal issues. We're having a lot of those pop up throughout the state. So you need to be aware of it if you are taking a listing. And then the COP, that is contingency on purchase. In other words, your buyer needs to sell their home before they buy a new one. And that document, how do you fill out that document to protect your buyer or seller? We're going to cover some resale transactions because we're hitting that mark where you are representing a seller that wants to now sell, that you help them buy, and the responsibility you have there, and the seller has actually, and escalation clauses, a hotbed right now. We're going to probably see some issues with this right now, and I'm going to maneuver through this to help you guys understand, if you're using escalation clauses, what you need to know about them, and then how to save $10,000. You'll want to stick for that. And then Mark Miller's initial review and final review. You may have noticed that he's got a little bit. Okay, so Mark's going to put in the chat box the agent and TC duties during a transaction. And feel free to ask some questions, you guys. If I'm talking and you say, I need to ask a question, feel free to pipe in and ask that. I'm not going to see if a hand is raised because I'm on my laptop and I only have the one screen, and I don't have the chat box open. But Mark's going to put in a handout, and basically what this handout describes is what is the role of the agent and what is the role of the transaction coordinator in a transaction. And if you're brand new, I get the fact that you need more guidance and you're not quite sure where you need to go and what you need to do in a transaction. And I remember my first transaction, I was like, what is this? All these forms, all these documents. Oh, I just give it to the TC. I just give it to the escrow person and they'll take care of it. Well, it's not as easy as that. So as an agent, we talk about, agency. Agency is the fiduciary duty to your buyer or seller. And you are the person that if you ever end up in any type of litigation, that will be the person that will be held responsible, not the transaction coordinator. So let me give you an example of how this plays out. And it plays out a lot recently. And and not just brand new agents, but we also get it from agents that are seasoned, and I get it. You're all busy, you're all out there. You need a document sent out. Well, one thing you need to understand is the transaction coordinator is, one, not your assistant. In other words, they don't work for you to assist you. And number two, first and foremost, they're not vested with the responsibility of creating transaction documents. If there's ever any litigation or court adjudication or anything like that, the TC won't be the one that's pulled in. It will be you, the agent, that's pulled in and saying, you know, based upon this document that you wrote, it looks like XYZ. So it's important for you to understand it's incumbent upon you and your responsibility that if you have any type of transaction documents that need to be made up after, let's say you open escrow, you need to do an amendment to the existing agreement, you need to modify commission instructions or anything about that. If you want your transaction coordinator to do it for you, they can, to a degree that you are instructing them exactly how to CYA would be to put it in an email about what you want in that document. TCs are not allowed to fill out extension of time addendums, COP forms, contingency release forms, unless you instruct them exactly how to word it. That's where it'll get you in trouble if you just rely on your transaction coordinator to create documents, because ultimately you are the one responsible for the creation of those documents. So that doesn't mean that, oh, my TC can't create a document for me. Yes, they can. And all of them have very clear, specific guidelines on how to do that. But the most important thing to remember is they're not going to create it, but they can put it together based upon your instruction. Now, does that make sense? And since I can't see everybody's faces, does anybody want to chime in?
Yes,
Go ahead.
it makes sense.
Good, thank you, Peggy.
Welcome.
Okay, great. All right. So if nobody has anything else, so in this document that Mark sent you, this document is also available on the KW Metro folder that you all have access to, and we store all the important documents like the logos you need, our agent handbook, our W-9 form. We also have this now and there that we update. We have our broker policy in there as well. So all those forms are digital. They're always up to date. Whenever there's modifications or changes, we typically don't send it out to you. We use this as the direct link for everything, okay? All right. So SIP and RLAS and the hotbed going on during COVID. So SIP is seller in possession after close of escrow. This is a form that's used if a seller is going to stay in that property 30 days or less, so basically 29 days or less. The RLAS is the residential lease after sale. That is if the seller is going to stay in the property 30 days or more. So let me share a story. Here's the hotbed issue about what's going on right now. And we know that in order sometimes for you to make your offer look more enticing, you're talking with the listing agent, which we want you to do, and you're asking them, well, what offer can I write that would make your seller happy and what's important? Well, the seller has another house that they're gonna buy and they need to close this one before they move into the next one. They'd like to stay in the property for 7 days. Great. In a real world, that's a great thing to offer that seller. Yes, go ahead and stay in the property 7 days after close of escrow. We'll incorporate the SIP. And matter of fact, we won't even charge you. Now, for a contract in the state of California, in order for it to be valid, it has to have a few elements. And one of the elements is it has to have a financial number to it. So even if it's $1, just put $1 on it, okay? Because it has to have a a cost to it. So some type of money in it. And the word's escaping me because I'm in 109-degree heat.
Consideration.
Yeah, what was that, Mark?
Consideration.
Consideration, that's the word I'm looking for. Very considerate of you, Mark. So you make that deal, you consummate it, you get into escrow, and here's what happens about maybe 60, 70% of the time. The SIP and the RLAS is not consummated at the time the purchase agreement is consummated. And Mark's got to put in the initial review to go back and get it consummated. Because basically in essence, the seller's going to stay there, but you haven't put together what that means at the same time you're consummating the agreement. So it's important to have those documents filled out at the same time that the contract is filled out. Here's why. 9 times out of 10, you get into escrow and you don't have those forms filled out, and then all of a sudden it becomes an issue, and now you have an uncooperative seller that doesn't want to fill it out. I don't need to sign that. We're just staying here 7 days. Or the listing agent is not cooperating. Unfortunately, we have some listing agents that are out there that are like. Now you're at a crossroads because we're going to recommend that you tell your buyer, hey, if you close escrow on this property, you are technically now a landlord in the state of California. What's the landlord's responsibilities and rights now fall under the laws related to tenant landlord. And let's say that seller decides not to move. Now we're left with the buyer, who is now a landlord, because they are now the owner of the property, has to evict that tenant/seller. And that tenant/seller is not moving. Now you've just created a big chasm for your buyer because now they have to go through the courts and to get that seller out of that property. Now, who are they going to point the finger at? Anybody?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. You said during the initial offer, you mean also countering, it's okay. Just before acceptance, you want that documentation in order. Is that what you're saying? Before acceptance?
At the same time.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
You're also consummating they're signed at the same time.
Think
A
of it
lot
like
of us will see an RLAS that will say PIT, taxes and insurance. Well,
Your internet
that's
is going in and out.
Oh, is it?
Robert, you're breaking up a little bit. Can I just interject that
Please.
with this SIP and RLAS, think of it like this, everyone. It's like any other addendum that you're going to add in. Like if you were going to add in a septic well monument, SWPI, you would add that in right when the contract is signed. It's a part of the contract. So don't, there's a temptation to wait and see, well, how many days will we need the SIP for, or the RLAS? Everyone wants to wait, and that can lead to problems because if your transaction's adversarial for some reason, people are going to say, well, I'm not signing that thing now, but I'm not leaving the property either, and then you have problems. So it's a part of the purchase agreement needs to be signed and fully executed at the time based on what you think the time period's going to be that the seller is going to remain in possession. And then if it changes, you change it with an amendment of existing agreement terms.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Robert, are you back? Are you back with your signal there or?
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Must have been the pool boy getting in the way.
I had a situation like that where we all thought we were going to close on time, and it was one of those sellers also buying another property. So we didn't put together an SIP because we didn't think we were going to need it. But both parties closed late, and we never had a SIP in place. And we're sitting there with my buyer, no place to live, and the seller is still in the property that the buyer already purchased. So we had no SIP, no agreement that they could stay there, but they were staying there anyway. And so we couldn't make an SIP because it was after the fact.
Yes, and that's usually where it ends up in a big hotbed issue for you guys.
It was.
One of the things on the car call on Friday was with the SIP, let's say you say, well, we're going to stay 7 days. And by the way, just let me know if I'm fading in and out. So 7 days. And then on the 8th day, they haven't moved, or the 9th day. Well, how are you going to go sue that seller because they've stayed in the property longer than they should have? They're like the guests that came and never left. You might consider what's called a holdover clause and adding a per diem in the SIP for any day past the period that you originally agreed to. And then that will allow your buyer to go sue them in small claims court to get that money. Without that in the SIP, they don't have a chance in Snowball's chance and you know where to go and get that money from that seller. At least with this, there's now a contract written that will help your buyer recoup some of that money they're losing. Why is this important right now? Well, during COVID, we now have challenges with getting tenants evicted. The courts are shut down or backlogged. There's federal guidelines, state guidelines, county guidelines, and city guidelines about eviction moratoriums. And then on top of that, you need to add not only their eviction moratoriums, but is it a government guaranteed loan? Because the eviction on that would be different than it was a person that just owned it outright. So there's a whole hotbed of stuff right now going on. And thank God to CAR, everybody asked, well, what is CAR giving us? CAR has stepped up and met with us every Friday since COVID hit, and has given us a real life forum to go through all these problems that every broker in the state of California is hitting. And this is what we're bringing to you. Basically, we've taken that CAR call and condensed it into something that's, the stuff that's real hotbed stuff going on right now. So if you are doing a transaction where the seller is going to remain in effect and stay in that property, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. Mark's here and I'm here for, to help you make sure you put that buyer in a good position and that they don't come after you after close of escrow because now they're a landlord and they can't get that seller tenant out. The other big hotbed is tenant occupied legal issues. Mark's going to drop in the chat box a CAR Q&A. Now, here's the most important thing, because I get a lot of calls, and so does Mark, about, well, I have a tenant in this property. What do I do? Well, we can't guide you either, and neither can you guide that seller. We recommend that you follow this document, and CAR has a legal hotline that you can call once you get the specifics of that tenant occupied property. Are they in a month-to-month? Are they in a lease? Is someone living in the house that isn't under the lease? Here's a really good story. We had a listing once down at the Mark downtown, and that was a luxury listing up on the 34th, 36th floor. Tenant occupied property, tenant wasn't paying rent. We got the listing, and then the tenant wasn't paying rent, and the seller had to go evict that tenant. Guess what that tenant did before he moved out? He moved someone else in, and that person effectively became a squatter, and they had to go through the eviction process with that squatter as well. It took a year before that listing could go to market. So it is really hard, and that wasn't during COVID. Imagine if right now during COVID to try and get a tenant out that's not paying rent. So look at that. There's also, here is the CAR legal hotline. And we are just sending everybody to that because they have the up to the moment Q&A for everybody's legal. So you got to get all you have to understand, you get all the information together about that tenant. But most importantly, my recommendation is, and I want you to get a listing, and if it has a tenant in it, you should recommend to the seller that the tenant should be vacated prior to taking it to market. only because of the tenant occupied issues that are happening during this market, plus the fact that there's COVID on top of it. And most tenants are not being cooperative during the escrow process. They don't want people in. They're afraid. They're not going to allow showings, even though they're legally obligated. The seller is legally obligated that they can do it. It just becomes a mess for you guys, and you're all like, "What do I do?" Recommend to the seller that they get the tenant out prior to going to market. There will be a window period where it will be vacant, but trust me, who will agree with me that a vacant listing that's showroom ready will sell for more money than with a tenant in it that has 2 cats and a litter box and a dog and maybe a couch with a bedspread on top of it, right? So think about, take them down the road about, you're going to make that home showroom ready, and they're going to get more money for that home down the road with it being vacant, because vacant properties are a lot easier to show and you'll have more people show up. Any questions on that?
Can I just make a comment real quick?
Yes.
For anybody that doesn't know, the eviction moratorium runs until March 1st, 2021. So even if there's a tenant right now that's not paying rent, and the landlord wants to get them out, they can't even start the eviction proceedings till March. So we're talking like 6 months down the road. So just be aware of that. I've refused to take a couple listings because they're tenant occupied and the tenants aren't paying rent right now. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there so everyone knew.
Thank you, Chris. And that brings up what you guys should be doing is refer your seller also to a lawyer that knows tenant landlord law, and put that in writing, memorialize it in an email. If they want to move forward, they need to be aware of the implications of what a tenant occupied property is and all the legal issues, and you can't guide them, because remember, what did I say earlier? It's written right there. You are not an attorney, okay? Never give legal advice, tax advice, zoning advice, foundation advice, roofing advice. The less you know, the better off you'll be down the road. One of my favorite agents, Sal, he's that way. He's like, I don't know anything. I just help them buy and sell. That's it. I don't know anything. I don't know. Yet he knows. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
In regards to this SIP, what you're recommending is that we do fill out the SIP at the time of the negotiation, and so it's part of the purchase agreement all in one. But you can also do this before close of escrow, right? As long as you're doing, you agree with the other party on whether the seller stays, whether he rents back or not. As long as you do this before close of escrow, you should be okay as well, right? I mean, I understand that it's more convenient if you can do it at the beginning, but I just want to make sure that—
Mark, you want to take that?
Yeah, I would. If the seller in possession issue is known at the time that the purchase agreement is consummated, the SIP or RLAS form should be a part of the agreement. If that issue arises after the contract has been formed, it wasn't anticipated at the onset, but now it is an issue, then in that situation, I would say you could add it afterwards. But if it's known up front that it's going to be needed, or it's maybe something that is used to give the buyer's offer a preferential position, then it has to be defined at the onset of the contract. And the reason is because the parties can agree to the fact that the seller is going to remain in possession just by having a clause in the contract or checking the box in RPA section 9C, I believe it is. But it fails to define the terms of the seller remaining in possession. What's going to be paid? Who's responsible for HOA fees? Who's responsible for insurance? Who's going to take care of landscaping maintenance and so forth? All those issues are addressed in the SIP or RLAS document. So it's much broader than just the agreement of the parties to say, yes, you can stay for 7 days after close of escrow.
Okay, and in regards to the rent back scenario, which is pretty much the same thing, you know, the seller has not been able to close or will not close in time and wants to rent back the property. It used to be some time ago that 30 days will be sufficient. But do you guys see now people requesting 60 days rent back? Is that common? Is that
Well, that's a great question, Robert. So it also depends upon the buyer's loan. If the buyer is getting a loan, the lender would need to know that the buyer's going or the seller's going to remain in possession longer than 60 days, because you can't get a loan if a seller's going to stay in that property longer than 60 days. The buyer has to move into that property. So that opens up a whole nother can of worms. If you have a owner occupied loan they're getting, and then all of a sudden now they have a seller in there that's a tenant that they're trying to evict, and it goes past the 60 days. So then the lender will need to know about the seller remaining in possession.
okay? Thank you.
All right, great question though, thank you. All right, here's what's happening, and I talked about this last week, but I want to bring it up again. So the COP, this is the contingency for the sale of the buyer's property. So listing agents, listen up. This is important for you, but also buyer's agents. This is what's happening with some of the agents out there. In an effort to get their buyer's offer accepted, what they are doing is they are just presenting you with an offer and not letting you know that the seller has a home they need to sell before they can close on this one. Back in the days, we used to call this the 72-hour clause, where a buyer would go make an offer on a property and they check the box 72-hour clause. The seller will give them a notice to remove that clause within 72 hours, otherwise cancel the contract. So in order for the buyers to get their offers accepted, they're not letting you know that they have another home they need to sell. So here's what you need to do is check with that buyer's lender and ask them, tell me about their qualifications. I need to know if they can buy this home and what are the, do they have another home to sell? Just ask that question because you'll get it from the lender. They'll let you know. And Movement Mortgage has offered to reach out to them as well too as an add-on service. So utilize the people at Movement Mortgage. So you get the offer accepted and then boom, the agent comes back and tell you, oh, by the way, my buyer has to close escrow on this property that they have in escrow. They don't even tell you until after you've opened up escrow. So now you're left with a dilemma. Do you force them to, by doing the notices to perform so the seller could technically cancel the contract? Because you know the buyer's not going to be able to perform because they have to sell another house. Or and then you end up taking it, putting it back on the market with another, or hopefully you have maybe some backup offers. So it creates havoc. It could potentially cause an issue with that listing. Let's say it didn't get back on the market, because what happens when something goes into escrow and then comes back on the market? If it stays inactive. Anybody? What's your biggest fear when you take a listing and you put it into pending status and then the buyer cancels? What's your biggest fear about that listing? What do you think the buying public's going to think?
There's something wrong with the house.
Yes, there's something wrong with the house. So then every other buyer looks at it that way, and every other buyer's agent looks at it that way. Well, what's wrong with it? Why did that buyer cancel? And you got to go explain, well, the buyer was fraudulent and didn't tell us that they had to sell a home before they bought this one. So it creates havoc, but just be aware, if you're a listing agent, be aware of this. Vet those buyers via the lender that they don't have a property in escrow. Because I know there are some unscrupulous agents out there that are doing this. And I won't mention their names, but if you ever want to call me off record, I will tell you who they are, because they are on my list now and they know they're doing it. the other thing about this is how do you fill it out properly to protect your buyer or seller? So in section 8, 8A, if you leave that blank, and if buyer fails to complete these actions within 3 days after delivery of such notice, seller may then immediately cancel the agreement in writing. So basically, 8A is the old 72-hour clause that says, hey, we're going to notice you to remove that contingency, the COP, otherwise we're giving you 3 days, and then boom, we're kicking you out if you can't remove it. But 8B is where it's favored the buyer. Depending on how that's filled out, it's a delayed right to notify buyer. If 8B is checked, it basically says seller shall not invoke the notice provisions in paragraph 8A within the first 17 or blank days after acceptance, meaning the seller can't notice the buyer to remove the COP within 17 days. Or the very last box, during the term of the agreement. During the term of the agreement basically says, you can't notice me at all to remove the COP until we close escrow, basically. And so it becomes really confusing for everybody when we're filling all this out. What is it? Can we notice them in 3 days? Do we have to wait for 17 days? So every transaction is different, and you need to know the nuances of what that seller has in escrow and where they are, if it is an escrow, where their escrow process is, because that seller will not want to have the provisions invoked to remove that contingency until they have their sales side all locked up. And that depends on when the timelines hit in that other escrow they're in. So it becomes a little stressful situation where you're helping a buyer buy one place, but sell another one at the same time. And I see agents go through frustration a lot on this, and stress and restless nights and loss of sleep and fear of, I don't know, but anyway. So again, when you consummate the transaction, if you need to know how to fill this out, more than welcome to call us. I just put the section 8A because that's the important part to talk about. Now, the good thing is CAR is reformatting this document, and so it'll be in the December release, Mark, is that right? To make it easier for the agents to understand. Because to me, it's kind of confusing just to look at it. And I can imagine what some agents, when they are presented with it, what? So anyway, anything else on that, Mark?
No, it is somewhat of a confusing form. So if this comes up in your transaction, just please reach out to us and we'll help you with it.
Okay, resale transactions. So you have a listing that we actually, or you help that seller buy. And because of that, if we help them, well, guess what? We're in receipt of transaction documents on that purchase as the broker. So what are your duties if you have a seller that was also a buyer within the past 3 years? Well, you as the listing agent are responsible for gathering those documents. And once gathering them, it's a great time to and go through those transaction documents, especially the disclosures on their purchase, to revisit some of the things that they may have forgotten about. So when they fill out their disclosure packets, they can make sure that they have all the information necessary for their disclosure documents. Now, when I say this, it's your duty as the listing agent to find them. So you will have access to them because you helped with the transaction. Now, it's not Mark's deal to go find them, and it's not the TC's deal to go find them. It's actually your guys' responsibility. And if it's within the last three years, they will be in your zip forms, broker edition, or they will, if it's within the last 8 months, they'll be within your command. So you have access to all these documents. This isn't something we put together. We'll assist you if you can't find them, but it takes some time to pull them together. And we will assist you, but we won't be responsible for getting them for you. That is your responsibility. And 3 years is the legally required retention period. But if you have access to stuff that's longer than that, the one thing I learned when I was a brand new agent was disclose, 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 disclose. Whatever you have the seller disclose. So if you have access to old documents, and let's say the seller has access to old documents and maybe you didn't help them, if they have them, see if they'll want to provide them to the next buyer. It won't hurt. Remember, 90% of all issues after a close of escrow comes from disclosure related issues where the buyer says, you never told me that. And that's where they end up in court and they end up with huge claims. Any questions on that? Okay, escalation clauses. This is what CAR is recommending. Now, in the past, our corporate attorney says, don't do escalation clauses. They're considered constructive fraud, and you could lose your license because it could appear that you as the buyer's agent are in collusion with the listing agent to get the value of the property higher than it really should be worth. However, COVID hit, low inventory hit, low interest rate hits. There are escalation clauses all over the place, and we haven't seen the beginning of the legal ramifications of what's going to happen because guess what? Agents aren't attorneys, and agents aren't good at crafting legally binding language for a document. So our risk management practice is to advise the buyer that if they want a escalation clause, that they should consult with a qualified California real estate attorney to help them write the language. Whether or not they do it is not the point. The point is you advise them. Let's say you do write an escalation clause, and let's go for the example. We represent the seller, and the offer says that the buyer will pay $10,000 over appraised value. However, the offer is $30,000 over list price. Will the seller have to reduce the price to the $10,000 over appraised value? Or should the seller counter no appraisal contingency? Oh, I got a few people stumped. Mark, do you know the answer? Because I don't know the answer.
I don't.
I have an idea.
Me too.
Yes.
Why not negotiate? Why not say, okay, you agreed for 10,000, but would you agree for 15,000?
Well, the challenge is what we're talking about, Judy, is the actual language in the escalation clause. This is where agents get in trouble.
I would
And
not
this
reduce.
is where they could actually get their seller in trouble, because if they craft an escalation clause where the seller, let's say the seller is expecting it to be $30,000 over list price and they know they're going to get it. But let's say the agent ill-advised crafts an escalation clause that doesn't get them that money. And the seller has to accept the lower purchase price. Then that seller has a claim against you because the language you clause. So really, this is my point on this. My point is, if you don't know how to write an escalation clause the way you want it written, then you need to make sure first consult with me and Mark, but also you need to advise the seller to speak with a qualified California real estate attorney to craft the language. That's going to deflect the risk on you and risk on broker that won't stick your seller in a deal or your buyer in a deal that neither of them can consummate. By the way, who knows this? FHA loans can't pay over the appraised price. So if you got an escalation clause with a buyer that's getting an FHA loan, no bueno.
Hey, Bob, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused here because I thought that the appraisal contingency only is to defend the buyer. the appraisal contingency does not apply to the seller. In other words, if the appraisal comes back higher, he wanted to sell at 500, the appraisal came at 530, he's still on the contract to sell it at 500. He cannot pull out of that contract and try to renegotiate the price and says, no, you know what, it's worth more, I need to sell it for 530. So correct me if I'm wrong there, but the appraisal contingency is designed to protect the buyer. So if the property does not appraise to the value, he doesn't have to come out of pocket with the difference because the lender is not going to give him any more money. So can you clarify that to me? Because I don't know that the seller has the right to renegotiate the price at that point.
Well, you're asking me a legal interpretation on a question I can't answer because I'm not an attorney.
So
And
Robert,
that's my answer.
my question is this: are you saying that the? Are you
I'm
saying that?
right here.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that the FHA VA advisory says that they cannot pay more, or is it that the bank won't pay more? Because I've always been able to negotiate the price, even though we have FHA or VA loan, as long as it comes in form of cash.
What came up on the car call was if a buyer's in an FHA loan, they can't pay over the appraised value. So if it appraises for 500, but the purchase price was 510, that buyer can't come out of pocket for that extra $10,000 on an FHA. I didn't say VA, FHA.
It's not true for VA.
Mark, no.
I don't know the answer on that one, Peggy. If it applies to both, but you know, an FHA or HUD loan would probably be the same, but the VA, I don't know.
So escalation clauses, they're a nightmare. That's the point.
Yeah, Robert, let me add one more, layer of complexity into that. Unfortunately, is that we're talking about escalation clauses, which could increase the purchase price, and then we're also talking about, excuse me, low appraisals and what happens then. There's two things going on. There are two elements at work, and they're both a very slippery slope. So you have to, be very careful with those. And CAR's latest guidance now is, basically, if your client wants to use an escalation clause or some kind of a low appraisal clause or something, they're recommending that agents tell them to seek the advice of an attorney to draft the clause.
All right, how to save $10,000. $10,000 is your agent deductible if you're ever in a claim where the CRES, our E&O carrier, has to pay out. So we found this little nugget the other day. Thank you, Mark. CRES has a claim prevention legal advisory services hotline that could sometimes be a little better than trying to get through CAR Legal. So, and because it's not a million agents trying to call CAR Legal, it's just people with our E&O carrier. So if you have an issue and you can't get me, can't get Mark, can't get through to CAR, let's call CRES. They're the ones that actually would pay out the claim, and they'll give you guidance on how to structure a transaction or maneuver through it. So save that number. Mark's initial and final file review, did you guys notice any difference in the past few weeks? They're a little bit shorter. So big round of applause and thumbs up for that. So in the past, Mark was giving you information as to why you should do some forms. Now we've gone with, let's just give the down and dirty and show them exactly what they're missing and how to, and then have them incorporate that into the transaction. So in your initial and final review, it'll be very bulletproof checklist, missing this, add this, and then you can go back and amend the contract documents. Q&A. So let me just cover a few things that are the biggest issue that are coming up. Open houses. Legally, no, you can't do open houses. However, there's a new phrase that you can use in your marketing advertising, And we'll come up with more specific guidelines in the next week, but it would be called a COVID compliant home tour. The word open house is the word that most agents are getting in trouble with. And by the way, up in Sacramento, which the governor's office sees this, they know that agents are doing open houses, and that's why they have not lifted their restrictions. It's almost like, you know, we have the mask police, and thank God we have them now. If we as an industry are not obeying what the Department of Health and OSHA and the governor's office have said we have to operate, we could be closed down again. So just be aware of that. But let's call them COVID compliant home tours, where they're pre-registration and they have all the PEDs. And by the way, this, I want you to see this. Dun, 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 dun. Enforcement online complaint system. Guess what? You can now turn in your agents from other companies that are not following the rules and doing open houses and letting the public in. You go to this website, and Mark will drop that in the chat bar, and you just issue a complaint. And guess what? I better not get one of these from you guys, but their broker and will get this from the DRE, and then the broker will have to deal with it. So now you can turn in your fellow agents that aren't following the rules. PEDs and rugrats. This question's asked a lot on the PED form. Hey, my buyers have 2 kids. Do we have to have them sign it as well? Section 8 specifies that the signer, the parents, are signing for the children. Section 8 and Section 9, I believe, Mark, and they're listing the children in Section 9. So know that on the PEDs, this is the biggest question I get. If they bring in their kids, Section 8, Section 9 covers that in the PED. So for the RDRs out there, this is your information of the day, the tip of the day. And then active listings cleaning protocol. I get asked that a lot. Yes, it is the responsibility of the broker and the seller to make sure that you can have the buyer's agent that are bringing people in to clean that in between showings. No flyers still allowed on the property, and no door knocking. That's what I'm asked. Those are the questions I get asked pretty much every week. All right, any other questions in the time remaining?
Did you just say no door knocking, so no cold calling?
Door knocking. Cold calling on the telephone you can do all day long.
No. I was talking about door knocking in a neighborhood. Okay.
No door knocking.
Okay.
You will be on that COVID complaint enforcement online complaint. And then you'll be asked to leave the brokerage.
And that comes from CAR, or that's our internal?
That is the guidance of CAR.
That's CAR. Okay.
As mandated by the state of California, the governor's office, the Department of Public Health, and OSHA. These are the rules they put in place, and CAR just gives us the guidance on it. It's not CAR telling us what it is, it's CAR interpreting what they are told that how we need to operate. And remember, I'm not in charge, they're not in charge, COVID is in charge. And until COVID goes away, we will be under these rules.
Robert, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just wanted to address that question that you guys had about that FHA. Did you mention that you couldn't, an FHA buyer couldn't pay more than the appraised value?
That's what we were given on the CAR call on Friday.
A bank wouldn't have any problem with it, just so you know. If they have the money, they could pay more than the appraised value.
Okay.
I just got off the phone while you guys were talking. I called my underwriting team lead, and they said as long as they have the money, they can pay for it.
So it's okay with movement. It must have been okay with one lender out there.
Yeah, somebody was probably, yeah. But just so you know.
All right, so to recap, thank you, Eddie. Use that enforcement online complaint system, you guys, if you see agents not playing by the rules. We're all in this together, and if we don't clean up the industry, we're going to be doing this a lot longer. And we don't want that. So wear your mask in the office. If you're outside of your own personal office, if you're there at training in a public area. Otherwise, if you don't have a mask, no entry. And thank you all, everybody. I hope you all make it a great day. And we will chat with you later. And thank you all for giving me my vacation. No calls right now. Don't call me for clarification. I'm still officially on vacation. This is the only hour you're getting me this week. All right. Love you all. Bye.
Love you, Robert. Thank you
Thanks,
so much
Mark.
for that and wearing a shirt for today. So thank you guys.
Just a
See you
shirt.
later.